Joining us on the wake-up call this morning to talk about a story that kind of broke yesterday, it is Karen Kataline, and we're going to talk about Princess by Proxy syndrome, and we'll explain kind of what, if you're going, what exactly is that? We'll explain it in a second. Karen also has an MSW from Columbia University. She's the author of FATLASH, Food Police and the Fear of Thin, a Cautionary Tale. Karen, thanks for joining us from Colorado this morning.
It's good to be with you. Sounds like you got snow up there too.
We have snow, but not down here on the lowlands. Up once you get into the Cascades and the foothills, that's where it's starting to fall. But anyway, at least here, no white to pass along. Anyway, that said, yesterday one of the stories in the news has to do with JonBenet Ramsey and the JonBenet Ramsey case. Yep. And the news had leaked out that actually a grand jury had said that they believed that there was enough evidence to charge the Ramseys, John and Patsy Ramsey, with the death of their daughter, JonBenet Ramsey. And the district attorney at the time decided that he did not want to press charges against the two. And I think for a lot of people, yesterday brought up a lot of bad memories, because that case in particular, I remember that as being kind of one of those, I don't know that landmark is the right word for it, but definitely, in some ways, it crystallized a lot of things that were going on in the 90s and even the early 2000s, dealing with kids, this whole Princess by Proxy thing that we're going to talk about here. I mean, it brought up a lot of issues for folks. And then you look at something like Honey Boo Boo, and you just shake your head and go...
Toddlers and tiaras.
Yeah.
Did you ever think that 16 years after JonBenet Ramsey, we'd have toddlers and tiaras?
No.
It's stunning, isn't it?
You have actually... You know a little bit more about this than the average person, because your mom evidently had Princess by Proxy, and she tried to do the same thing with you that the Ramseys did with JonBenet, did she not?
In an amazingly similar way, yes. The similarities are almost stunning.
Talk about it.
It took me 15 years to write this book, and the similarities are really quite stunning. The term Princess by Proxy was just coined recently by the person who wrote the foreword in my book, Martina Cartwright, who has a PhD and an RD and is a dietitian and all of that. And she gave us a term to really, as you say, crystallize for us the strange phenomena of extreme pageant moms who live through their children. In my case, my mother, there's about 11 pictures in my book, FATLASH, and one of them is of me in a sequin costume doing the splits at about the age of 5. I was put on the stage at 3. I described my mom as a stage mother on steroids. Mm-hmm. But in the next chapter, there's a picture of my mother at about the same age in a sequined costume, you guessed it, doing the splits. So this is a progressive and generational problem, and yes, it has something to do with, the baseball dads and soccer moms and football dads and that kind of thing, but there's another much more insidious aspect of the child beauty pageant syndrome, and that is that we're sexualizing little girls. And there are ramifications to this. It isn't a benign experience. The kinds of things I'm seeing today, I couldn't have imagined. One of the most extreme stories I read, and it's horrifying to even say, let alone think about, was a mother who got fake boobs and butt padding for her 6-year-old. There are mothers who are dressing their children up like Dolly Parton. And they don't understand that this is indeed a form of child abuse. And I experienced it. And one of the things I did was, when I was 16, I got to be 285 pounds, so I made sure there wouldn't be any more beauty pageants. And that was unconscious, by the way. I didn't wake up one day and say, I think I'm going to get really huge. No, what I did was, and it was my mother putting me on very, very strict diets that led an unconscious reaction, which I like to call, and which I have called, a FATLASH, because women use weight as protection when they are being sexualized and objectified.
So, as you've gone through and looked at this, the whole idea of princess by proxy, how many of these little princesses have you found when they grow up, balloon?
Well, here's the thing. There isn't a lot of research on this yet. The reason I was chomping at the bit to write this book was not because I wanted to write a vanity memoir about my story. My story is one that I know the best. My mother was quite unique and extreme in the 60s in beauty pageants when we wore little lace anklets and black patent leather Mary Janes, okay? Mm-hmm. The thing is, the reason I call it a cautionary tale is because I wanted to prevent a whole nother generation of little girls from going through what I've gone through and having to write a book like FATLASH. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen, but I do think that we can. It's such a preventable issue. And I do think that through education, through stories like mine, and through people speaking out, I'm not one of those people that thinks the government ought to ban beauty pageants. I don't think the government is very good at those kinds of things because, frankly, it doesn't take a beauty pageant to sexualize a child. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I live in the land of the John Benet Ramsey story because it's in Colorado where there are people who are truly walking encyclopedias about the subject. And the lesser-known information is that John Benet went to school sometimes disheveled. She went to school hungry, which isn't surprising because she had her food policed, thus the term food police in the title of my book. Mm-hmm. And what people don't understand is that women or mothers, and they are primarily mothers, but not entirely, who suffer from this syndrome, princess by proxy, the child is actually getting neglected. The child isn't really there. They're kind of the golden goose, who lays golden eggs. But in fact, their development is being stilted tremendously. And I do speak from personal experience. Yeah. I struggled for a long time to try to make sense of what I went through as a kid. And that's what the book is about.
Karen, you talk a lot about the princess growing up. What about the dads involved? How much are the dads? I mean, you always see in reality shows it's always the moms, but
yeah,
are the dads doing this too? Are they guilty at all?
Well, I can't make a broad generalization, but I can tell you that I had a very absent dad. I grew up in the 60s when dads sort of thought that their job was to put food on the table. I had fantasies that my dad would save me from all of this, take me to work and, show me what he did for a living and that kind of thing. But he was really pretty absent emotionally. And my story, describes that in some detail. I was kind of pleased when I read a story in the recent, and this is endemic to the culture now, of a dad who lobbied in a divorce court to get custody of his child because his wife was putting his daughter in child beauty pageants. I don't know how that story came out, but dads can do a tremendous job because what's really part of what's going on is mothers who are trying to complete or get the recognition, the ego boosts from out of their children that they're missing in their own lives. It's an issue of boundaries. We've got to bring back the idea of boundaries, not only between governments telling us what to eat, but parents understanding that if children are going to develop healthy, they have to have a sense of boundaries and a sense of body integrity, that they're not going to be exploited and displayed for the use and abuse of other people.
We're going to have to cut this short, but with that particular statement and a statement that you made earlier about some of these mothers looking at their children as the golden goose, I cannot help but think of Honey Boo Boo, and I almost gag saying that because that's not her name.
It's a atrocious. May I also say that I would
Sure.
love to continue this discussion either on Facebook, FATLASH, or I write a lot of blog posts at my website, fatlash.com, about these issues because we've got to be able to reverse this trend, and I think individuals, one to the other, can do that.
All right. Karen, thanks for joining us on the Wake Up Call. Again, the book is FATLASH, Food Police and the Fear of Thin, a Cautionary Tale. It's FATLASH, FATLASH.com. Thanks for joining us on the Wake Up Call this morning, Karen.
My pleasure.
All right, you take care. It is 7:38, News Radio 1120 KPNW.